Hello, everyone. Let's go over the next major assignment, which is another synthesis essay assignment, but really focusing on two scholarly sources this time and focusing a little bit down further of the works that we've been reading to kind of get a better sense of what the scholarship is out here. So the same specifications are in place, MLA format, all the different kind of margin settings and so forth. The due date is February 17th at 11. I'll have the grades in by this week for the first one, so you'll have ample time to kind of adjust any kind of issues or approaches depending on how you did with the first assignment. So the major differences for this one, as I said, it's two sources now. So instead of just one source, I want you to find two. So this is, on top of that, it's a little bit more of a compare and contrast paper than what you did for the first assignment. What I want you to do is either choose Macbeth or Frankenstein, and then, and whatever you decide to choose, look at the literature as well as any kind of cinematic or television adaptations and so forth. So if you want, you could do, a source on Macbeth and a source on Throne of Blood. Make sure the source on Macbeth is the play from Shakespeare. Same specifications in terms of what we are expecting with the scholarship. It should be from 2005 to the present. In this case, it's going to be a little bit longer since you're tackling two sources. It should be about 2 to 3 pages. Again, it's just to show how you understand the study of literature and studying film and so forth. So basically, the only addition that I expect from this synthesis, besides the same kind of expectations for the first, is this section, right? There should be a good, clear compare and contrast sections on the similarities and differences. And again, that should be at least good, 3 to 4 paragraphs showing me the differences and similarities and so forth. As I said in the first one, use the Primo, use the, kind of literature-based databases, to help find your sources. All the drafts that I've seen that people send me, it seems like you're doing the research well. In terms of the grading scale, basically it's the same thing. So be careful with, again, specificity, so how do the authors argue their thesis, what's the kind of minor premises, and then, the general maybe compare and contrasts, in the introduction. The summary of the argument paragraphs and the summary of the evidence, again, should be clear. I should have a good understanding of what the main thesis statements are and so forth. I should have a good understanding of how the authors clarify their points, use textual evidence or visual evidence, depending on if it's the movie or the play or novel and so forth. And then, of course, the conclusion. And this is where you could really, kind of fine-tune your approach, since you are doing a compare and contrast essay, essentially, as well as a synthesis one. Really focus on, what can you conclude about how and why people study these works? What does it mean based on all these similarities and differences? What does it mean for why people study Frankenstein or Macbeth and so forth? And as always, MLA format matters because we're in an English class and, it's writing enriched and all that. And of course, grammar always matters too. So just make sure, have good, decent spelling, standard diction and so forth. So again, it's similar to what you were doing in some ways, a little bit different with the second source. As with the previous one, I have a good example. So, and again, you don't necessarily need to begin just by focusing on one, but, this student, focused on Mean Girls. So, there was one article here, and again, good, clear summary of the article, the second article here. And then what this student did is basically started analyzing the two articles kind of in her conclusion, and that takes up almost, pretty much, 2 pages. So, again, it was about 4 pages for this student. And then since, again, we're dealing with MLA, we want works cited, and these would be the formats for magazine and scholarly journals. So again, review kind of the example provided. You don't need to necessarily start off the way she did, because you could use a lot more specific maybe intro too, if you're more familiar with kind of good kind of compare and contrast techniques. But again, this is a good example to show, how clear we could summarize essays, and then how specifically we could compare and contrast in these last 2 paragraphs especially. Obviously, if you have questions, post them in the forum, email. In the meantime, just good luck with all the other assignments, and take care.